Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Future of XYZ. It's a fun summer conversation with Chris Denson. Chris, thanks so much for joining us on Future of XYZ today.
Woohoo! Literal round of applause. Okay.
I love it. Chris, you're the creator and founder of Visionology, which is a creative and innovation coaching practice for executives, founders, and creative professionals. But what's really interesting, what you bring to that, besides obviously having spent time in the corporate world at Omnicom, advising groups, like South by Southwest, and also working with the Googles and the UN and the Obama administration, all these kinds of like amazing top tier brands. You started out as a stand-up comedian. You've been a TV host and creator. You wrote a number one best-selling book called 10 Essential Rules for Breaking Essential Rules before the pandemic in 2019. um, and you have this kind of like almost, I call it bi-coastal, even though Detroit's not really a coast. It is. Detroit, where you grew up and you went to Michigan State, and now you're in LA, are two very different cultural references, to put it mildly.
100%.
So I think this ingenuity conversation coming from your own background is really fascinating. And that's what we're talking about today, is the future of ingenuity. So let's start, as we always do on Future of XYZ, with a definition of the topic in the context of what we want to talk about in your experience.
Yeah, I think ingenuity and innovation kind of go hand in hand, and I've always felt like ingenuity is an operating system, right? It is not just sort of like, oh, I think like this, or we do this as as an ingenuity methodology. It really is like every knob on the machine can be adjusted or reimagined in order for the machine to create new and different things. So it's the humans, it's the processes, it's the forms you might have to fill out, it's every little thing along the way, and then voila, you've done some form of magic trick that results in an uncommon business angle, point of view, thought leadership, et cetera, that is unique to you and your ecosystem.
I love that. I always do some really brief research, even on these like abstract topics. I usually do a lot of deep research, but even on the abstract topics, I like to kind of like dive in to be grounded in some facts. And the synonyms I came up with around ingenuity were like creativity, imagination, vision, talent, originality, things that you just said, but also some others. And I'm curious, based on your work specifically, how ingenuity is different from a few of these. And the first one is inventiveness. How is ingenuity different from inventiveness? And it doesn't have to be. You can say it's the
Yeah,
same.
I mean, that's a great question. I think ingenuity I feel like it's a little bit more tinkering, right? It's kind of like it's got a little bit of fafo to it. I don't know what language is like on your show, but right, inventors, it's like from scratch, never seen before. Ingenuity to me takes things and flips them on their head, or becomes an unexpected use of a technology or a system, and then the outcome of that again becomes unique. When I hear the word inventive, I mean, and they have obviously some shared traits, but when I hear that, I think the silly visual I got in my head was Rick Moranis and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's like I'm making a whole new gadget and I'm trying to like do
Gen X here.
shrink my family. Whereas like I have a better way of doing this. Is where ingenuity, I feel like,
I love
differentiates.
that. And what about innovation? How is ingenuity different from innovation?
Now, to me, they're like they go hand in hand. Like innovation is very, you talk about the word synonym. It's been very synonymous with my career, and so I think innovation requires ingenuity, right? So, I think it takes the temperature down on what people think it means to be innovative when we talk about ingenuity. I mean, even the moniker for my visionology practice, I say I like to help unlock new levels of ingenuity and clarity,
Mm.
right? I'm usually working with folks who are already somewhat innovative, right? And yeah. So
It's
I understand the
interesting.
semantics. Yeah.
And what about adapt? Like, is there a role for or a need for adaptability within Ingenuity?
Oh, it's all adaptability, right? I think it's, again, if you have this spirit of experimentation, it means you're going to A/B test. You're going to look for the results you didn't expect. You're going to have a hunch. You have to have some level of awareness of, like, there are extreme possibilities here. Um, and so when you have that appetite, you are looking for all sorts of results, or you at least you. And I think a lot of us, if you have a little bit more of a linear mindset or a linear type of creativity, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just like my whole career has been like, what's that over there? And maybe it can apply to something over here. And I
Mine
have
too.
zero clue. Right?
Mine too. I
Yeah.
think that adaptability is key, and it leads to, I think, one of the things in your website. It says that your work proves that in an era of relentless disruption, our most valuable asset isn't just our vision; it's our capacity for clarity, curiosity, and the unreasonable leap. Explain what the unreasonable leap is.
The unreasonable leap is you don't always have all the information you wished you had, especially if you're doing something that is either uncommon to you or uncommon to the world. And it's like, I have a hunch, which means I might have to leave a lot of familiar things behind, a job, a way of doing things, a partner, or whatever it might be, because it's like, I have a vision for what is possible. And I think what happened also along the way, and where I end up working with a lot of folks, is that there's the big V vision of what this end experience looks like. And then there's like, here's my hammer and my nail. I don't have enough to make that. Right. And so,
Yep.
yeah, but you have a toothpick version, then you use that toothpick version to get and so on and so forth. And I think it begins to leapfrog itself. And then that's where the unreasonable leap comes in.
I love that. It's interesting because there's probably a generational gap here. I mean, forget the Honey I Shrunk the Kids example
Right.
for the young people. They don't have a clue, but it's okay. I think one of the things that Ingenuity came up with when I was thinking about it was like resourcefulness. And
Hmm.
it's thinking about like our grandparents' generation. And like, I mean, I think about like they could fix anything, right? Like my neighbor just passed away and he was not my grandparents' generation, but like somewhere between my grandparents and my parents. And he was like old school, right? Like he could fix
Hmm.
anything with what he already had. He never needed to go to the hardware store, or very rarely. He just basically could like cobble things together. And I think about that in terms of ingenuity, but like that mindset, exactly what you just said, that unreasonable
Hmm.
leap in some ways and figuring it out. Is that being lost by our younger generations who are so reliant on having answers and blueprints and YouTube videos? Like, or is ingenuity just looking differently?
A great question. Um, I I feel like one mode of thought is that there is an overabundance of tools. So then there's the analysis paralysis, the like, which path is the right path? How long do I even stay on that path? How long do I hold this tool? Because I see a thousand other ones
Yeah.
all day, every day, and I see my friends and my colleagues and coworkers using different things. So whereas, previous generations, like, this is the machine, I'm going to use it and see how many different ways I can uh, put it to good use. But now there's so many pathways. So I think it requires a different level of an internal compass of like who you are, what your belief system is, what are you building that truly resonates with who you are. Where, like you said, our grandparents' generation is like, I need a job, we're going to put food on the table. There wasn't like a passion conversation as frequently as we hear it now.
Yeah. Well,
So
certainly not in the workplace, but so even at home, I feel like you just had to like figure it out because there wasn't the money, or you didn't hire people in the same way we do.
yeah, and I think there's a grit that is, I don't think it's lost, but I mean, as you're talking about, like, I feel like I'm thinking about my mom right now. It's just like the number of things she had to barrel through, right? And I think it just generationally, my challenges were just different than hers.
Yeah.
So it doesn't devalidate either side of that equation. It's just like your set of problems that dysregulate your nervous system and keep you up at night are very different than mine, but we are living a very similar experience, and that something's keeping me up at night.
Yeah, and the ingenuity in navigating all of that or of creating within it is of course the outcomes will be different, and that generation and the generation before it, and we keep evolving.
Absolutely. And I think that, like just back to the ingenuity piece, it's, finding that inner compass. That's the thing that keeps you moving forward when there's a lot of noise coming at you. So I think this kind of like recalibrating our own compasses as individuals is the thing that will lead to exponential ingenuity in each and every individual and team.
I mean, that's a really fascinating thing. I've spent most of my career talking about values-based leadership, values-based growth,
Hmm.
and authenticity long before it was a hip word. I don't use it anymore, and I haven't for about 15 years because it got so overplayed. But it
Right.
ultimately is what we're talking about, and whether you're talking brands, companies, or individuals, I think that inner navigation is part of as any coach or coaching practice, which is what you do now, Chris. How do you think that that ladders specifically to ingenuity in an organization, like the culture of an organization?
I mean, it's the same thing. I think we forget that humans are making whatever it is we're making. Right? How many times have you gotten on a Zoom call and you get straight to business? And then there's a follow up. There's like very little warmth, very little check in. And I think part of it, there's so many factors to it. But one of the big things is like the whole return to office conversation, where there was once a higher degree of serendipity that happens in an office. I might see you and like, oh, hey, Lisa, I like your sneakers. Oh, I got these on a trip to Mexico. You went to Mexico? Yeah. Actually, we're working on this project in Mexico. Maybe you can tell us about your trip? Just come into the meeting for 15 minutes, right? We're losing that sort of, I get to know who you are. And so creating space for that, creating space for it to be okay, to be like, either I'm not okay, or these are my weird kooky interests, and they actually can fit into the wheel of problem solving that we're doing if we're building things like trust and
Mm,
rapport. It's like I mean, the basketball finals just finished, and it's just like great teams have their own superpowers, but they all kind of like figure out how to use them together,
yep,
right?
totally.
And there's less space in the workplace for that now. So working with teams, I'm doing a lot of internal exploration, especially as it relates to the work.
Yep, totally. It's interesting. Your work, I think, offers a framework. I don't love that word, but it does. I mean, I don't have another word for a framework for navigating the invisible, you call it the invisible structures that define our creative and professional potential. When I read that, I'm thinking about two things which you just kind of touched on, like mindsets versus skill sets. Like,
Mhm.
is there a difference between the skill set and the mindset that's needed for ingenuity today and looking ahead the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, skill sets to me like become transferable. And I think a lot of folks, if let's say you're making widgets today and you want to open a sandwich shop tomorrow, and it's like, I don't have what it takes, right? Whatever imposter syndrome things pop up when you make that sort of leap of ingenuity. Um, but then you start to like really dig into what is a transferable skill, or what is a set of transferable skills. So maybe you have an ability to connect dots like a little bit quicker than someone else, or you're really good at analyzing numbers and information and like extracting the most important details. Like we're so used to resume building that
Yeah.
when sort of the creative opportunity comes up, we think we don't have what it takes. And that's at every level of the game. I've seen, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies go and do a new thing and like be flabbergasted. Is that the right word?
I
Flustered.
love that word.
I do too. I'm saying it yesterday for some reason. Which I will spare you the details. Uh, but yeah, so no, I'll drop the mic there.
It's cool. You talk about a lot of like, you know, these organizations or these people as kind of like complex antennas, where your role is like stripping away that static so that, and I think you call it the most unreasonable insights can find their footing. Like, why do we want that? Why do we want unreasonable insights to have footing?
Because Lisa, we've all been told we're crazy when we say, "Ooh, I had one of my favorite examples to point to, and he wouldn't mind me saying his name. His name is Drake Sutton Shearer. I interviewed him years ago, and I cite him in my book. But he was starting a cannabis business very early in the cannabis kind of like boom. Um, within first 10 minutes of our interview, he's like, yeah, we pitched our business 198 times before we saw a dime,
Wow.
right? And I was like, 198? Like, how do you keep track of that? How do you keep up the enthusiasm from time 8 to time 198? What feedback are you getting? What feedback do you need to incorporate? What do you actually believe is your correct in your hunch versus what the industry and the numbers and the data are telling you? Like, you have to have a little bit of loopiness to be able to like,
Keep going.
yeah, to be able to keep going. And so that inner signal is like the why you're doing this, who, like, what part of you genuinely resonates with it. I think I'll speak for myself. It's like my whiteboard is filled with ideas. I'm like, oh, that would be a cool t-shirt, or that would be a cool blah blah blah. And then there's a couple of things that are like the goosebump ones that I'm like, that's actually who I am. And I think in a world where there's a lot of noise, there's social media, you're seeing a lot of success porn. Like, look at this founder, like made $30 million.
$1 million.
Exactly.
First
And
trillionaire.
that is the noise, let alone if you have some sort of traumatic relationship with rejection or overperformance or presentation. And those are things I had to work through. And I've taken, a lot of trauma recovery training. I've taken psychedelic facilitation training, plus my like observational lens through what you mentioned earlier, like around stand-up comedy and the ability to get up on a stage by yourself and like risk everything and embarrassment and all the other stuff. So, you combine this little weird matrix of internal tools. And I think I like to help people like strip away the noise that are telling them the opposite of what they actually see in their minds.
I love that. And I mean, just to touch on that cross sectional toolkit that you have, which is very internally focused, right? I don't mean you internally, but like human shadow work and
Mm-hmm.
internals work, right? Like, plus you have like the mass communications and the entertainment and the media business and the business
Yeah.
transformation stuff, right? It's like that cross sectional knowledge. Do you think it's essential? Like, obviously, it gives you a certain like superpower in the helping others with ingenuity. But like, how do those two things that most people have one of, if they're lucky, much less this whole toolkit of both the business side and comms side and entertainment side mixed with these tools? How do you find that kind of plays into your own ingenuity?
Uh, it's, I'm a parent also. And I think sometimes when you are experiencing something that is familiar to you, like, oh, this happened to me as a kid, and here's what I can reflect on, or you're like, oh, this is a really good reminder because my son's going through something or my daughter's going through something. And it's like, oh, me too. Right. And it becomes just like through a very altruistic LA woo woo lens. It's like all these conversations are mirrors, right? And the careful thing is I have to make sure I'm not projecting my own experience onto the person, or extracting like things that they say and like reacting to them in a way that is somehow challenging for me. So that means I have to keep up my own internal dialogue and keep my like centering practices. And also like I love the tactical side of it, right? There's the internal stuff and like, oh yeah, yeah, you're sad. I get it. Let's see what we can do about that. And I'm being obviously facetious,
Yeah, yeah, no,
but
totally.
but then it's just like, yes, what does it look, feel, sound like? What's the venture firm you want to talk to? Oh, here's a resource. I know somebody who built a game. You guys should have a conversation. Like just start to like really build, but you're building from a place of a lot more internal spaciousness, and that's where the rubber hits the road. And once we're there, it's like it becomes exponential kind of building. And this is again like this can be entrepreneurial at an organization that's already 1,000 or 10,000 employees deep, or it can be like a mom and pop team that are just like trying to navigate the next few steps.
From 2013 to 2020, you hosted a show called Innovation Crush, and I think it's you had over 200 interviews with some pretty wild leaders in the world and change makers. Not totally dissimilar, in fact, to Future of XYZ. I have to say, I'm curious in that. What did you notice and observe of this theme that just keeps coming up in this conversation around ingenuity, which is it's not all professional performance based. There's this whole internal personal narrative. With those great leaders, what was that kind of like? I think you call it the inner signal, but like, what was that observation that you made?
From the inner signal part of it, I saw that a lot of people who were inventive, I'm going to throw a word back at you, in their fields, it always related to something that was internal to them. Perfect example is Miguel McKelvey, the co-founder of WeWork, not the one we saw in the documentary, but a different one. The other, and I interviewed him at an event in Montreal called C2. And what I found out during that interview is that he actually grew up in communal living. So it was like his mom, a couple of her friends, and their kids all lived under the same roof, and they shared resources and rides to school and tutors and clothes, and made it like it was this community like melting pot. And it's the DNA of what made WeWork work, as it was sort of in this high growth, stage, like to the point where they actually designed the hallways to be smaller to kind of force connection, right? And then when you saw other organizations or teams replicating this sort of real estate co-working model, it may not have grown as quickly and as fast because here somebody's just very natural to who they are. And I saw that time and time and time again. It's like, oh, you were like, or I'm showing it to people like, oh, you've always kind of been this way then. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah,
So that's one of the big takeaways.
it's so interesting. I'm gonna kind of hard pivot for a second, because I'm personally in love with this like example. NASA, when they sent Perseverance, the rover, to Mars not so long ago, and I'm a big NASA junkie, and we've had
Mhm.
the creative director David Rager of NASA on the podcast, and but the solar powered helicopter, which was the first ever aircraft to fly in what we'll call alien or Martian, atmospheres, was named Ingenuity. What do you think that that portends for kind of the future of Ingenuity?
As far as him making a helicopter? Wait, just say the question again. Like,
I just said
how
like it's
does?
the helicopter was called Ingenuity because it
Yeah.
was the first aircraft that was, first of all solar powered, but also like flying in any kind of atmosphere outside of the US or
Hmm.
sorry, of the planet. Hello. And so I was just curious, like, do you think that like does that ring a bell to you, like that it's called Ingenuity, or do you think it's just like a name?
I mean, I can understand why they named it that, right? I think it's funny. It makes me think of how a lot of firsts are named something really basic. The Facebook, which was a book of faces, like when it started, right? And then the next social media platforms had to be a little bit more kitschy, or they got to play around with the branding and how they talk about it and what other features it might have, right? There are first movers and there's fast followers, and I think those are two tracks of ingenuity slash innovation because first ever aircraft that can do X, Y, and Z, there will be fast followers, right? Look at SpaceX. Look at all the all the other ones.
Blue Origin.
Yes, thank you. Um, and so even in the agency world, I remember Wells Fargo was a client of ours, and Chase was one of the first ones to do mobile check cashing. You could just take a picture of your check and cash. Well, we had thought about it for them, but they were like, well, let's see how they do it first.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's sometimes with when you are the first, it's a little riskier, maybe, it's like but you also get to plant a flag, and that's
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Literally or metaphorically.
Right, right.
Totally. As we think about the future, there is undoubtedly many who envision the future of ingenuity being driven and defined by that seamless synergy between man and machine. Obviously, the conversation around AI is absolutely everywhere at the moment. There's just no
Hmm.
way around that. But like as we think about the hybridization of human creativity and AI, or artificial intelligence to spell it out, like what do you think, like where does that fit in the future of ingenuity? Do you think it's default? Do you think it's an additive? Do you think it's something completely other?
I don't have a crystal ball per se, but I do feel like everything else, there are myriad outcomes from these tools. When YouTube came online, it's like the studios felt threatened, right? When the television came online, the radio felt threatened, and like none of these things have gone away, right? We've just kind of spread the access points of creating things. Um, I do have a theory around, I don't know, I call it sort of a fifth industrial revolution where, because of the number of layoffs and how a lot of fear mongering about what AI will and won't do, it really gets us down to the space of thinking about who we are and how we're adding value, right? If the machine's going to do my job, then who am I? And for some, that's a resume question. It's a LinkedIn question. For others, it's well, it's an opportunity to find some depth. Because I do feel like human beings are inventive by nature. We love problem solving. It's game theory, right? It's the reason the video game industry does what it does, because it's chemically the releasing of problem solving endorphins, and you got to the next level and you keep doing it. We thrive on that sort of problem solving energy, and it doesn't have to be a business problem. It can be like, how am I going to get my kid to school tomorrow and I have 6 meetings and the cat is sick? You figure it out, right? And so with that, I feel like the AI is really having a lot of us go a little bit deeper. And then there's just the careful balance of how much reliance is on that. How much do you want to go alone with? Like, I always write first, and then I just finished a very intense round of pitching for a project that we won. But
Congrats.
thank you. But I tried my best not to use any AI tools. I wrote this flowery and this is one of the skill sets that I feel like is good to me. I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't design. I can write my ass off. And I wrote these 2 paragraphs, and I feel like it was one of those things that took us over the top. It was sort of our theory and thesis. And I'm like, even when I threw it in AI just to improve it, I was like, no, I'm going to
Yeah.
use my version. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that one. Those of us who enjoy and like writing and thinking strategically, there's a gap there.
Yeah,
We're
there was a
coming.
oh, sorry.
No, no,
I just
please.
This is just brief. There's a post on my Instagram, but but it was like a shot of a newspaper, and the headline was like, I want AI to do my dishes and my laundry so I can spend more time writing, not AI write so I can spend more time doing my laundry
A
and
hundred
dishes.
percent.
Right.
Be useful, please.
Yes,
No,
exactly.
totally agreed. I've seen that whether on yours or elsewhere, and I totally agree. We're coming up on time, Chris, but I do want to throw out 2 questions. One is a total zinger, and you won't have an answer, but I'd like your take. As the one eyebrow goes up for anyone
Improv.
listening. If we're so ingenious, which is of course the adjective for ingenuity, if we're so
Mhm.
ingenious as human beings, as the species, why haven't we solved the climate crisis yet?
My hot take is we don't believe we can. I think, in a lot of social good initiatives, we hear so much of what the problem is, right? There's compassion fatigue, there is confusion. I'm the kind of person that, like, I walk up and there's 3, 4 garbage cans. I'm like, oh no, I'm killing the planet, right? Like, because where do I put this straw? Like, it's just, or not, I don't use straw, but like, where
Sometimes
do
I'm
I put
sure.
this? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Biodegradable. But and I think when we have such opposing points of view on these things, it's
And no
hard to.
consistency. You've just described something that's a problem too. There's no
Yeah,
patterns in that.
yeah, and it's hard to organize, a few billion people, like, in the to head in the same direction. And so yeah, that's my initial thought, is just like there is a belief system, there are opposing belief systems in play that don't allow us to maximize the potential of what we could be doing.
Your work, the second to last question, Chris, your work talks a lot about maximizing potential in its own way and ingenuity being like that leapfrog. But do you think that we're starting to rely too much, especially as I think about like the built environment and our products and our technologies and our social networks and things, like are we relying more and more on like creating next generations rather than like real leapfrogs of ingenuity?
When it comes to generational conversation, and I hear this
No, I don't
all the
mean
time.
generational,
Oh,
like,
oh,
of ages. I mean, like, of the products, of the built environment, of the social networks. Are we just like coasting on the profitability of like the Apple iPhone is now at like a 17? Like, that's next generation, like, of the
mm,
product. That's what I meant. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, you know, planned obsolescence is a thing that's been around for a very long time. It's just like, oh, you can't use that anymore. I guess you got to buy the new one, right? We could have light bulbs that don't burn out, right? But the machine, and then you got to look at the balance of like, you know, people's livelihoods, right? The who is able to, like the people that are developing apps. If you look, I mean, just the iPhone alone, to speak to your example, is like it's created millions, if not trillions of dollars and opportunities for people all over the world. Working with the Obama administration and the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, I'm meeting like inventive founders from Haiti and Ghana and developing parts of the world because of this device that gave them access to information. Like there's a ripple effect, and I think that's why they say sure, the let us keep making $1 trillion and build a giant campus and do other things. And there's always the gap of like we
That
probably
it's
could solve
changing
the
our
hunger
brains.
crisis. Yes, exactly. And there's that part of it. But but to me that's the yin and yang of creating anything.
Yeah.
The Social Dilemma is a great documentary because it's like, oh, a like button would be so nice until somebody was on the other side of not receiving any, right?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
it's there are always unintended consequences, and I think it's our job to know that there's been a history of unintended consequences, and so how can we think through potential problems as we're building things that aren't just about funding and our own personal longevity and keeping our job. I have a
Totally.
lot of my clients. I was like, let's like, how do we make your job obsolete? Which most of us aren't even wired to think that way because you're like, I want to keep this job
Yeah,
and
no,
I have to
I'm
keep.
I'm totally on that later train. Like make it obsolete and like give like level up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. So last question, your greatest hope for the future of for ingenuity in let's call it 25 years or 2050.
2050. We'll all go to Mars on the Ingenuity. No, I do think it's this level of self-awareness. It's like, you know, it's the ability to know who I am and pass that skill set down, because the world's going to change, like tools, technologies, jobs, passions, all that stuff. But the thing that stays is who you are. And I'm trying to find better words to drive that point home.
I get
But
it.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I know I'm a goofball. I know, that humor is a thing that I use to disarm certain situations, but it's also true to who I am. I think nutty shit all the time. I just don't say it out loud. And sometimes I do.
That's the comic in you, I'm gonna guess.
1,000%, right? But for a long time, I didn't think that belonged in business
Hmm.
until I like really embraced the totality of who I am, flaws and all, perceived flaws and all, that I think really a different kind of escalation in my career happened.
Yeah.
So, and I would hope that more people like begin to see that there are opportunities for them to expand, expand their capacity, expand their points of view, and like be challenged in a way that doesn't become confrontational and they shut down and so on and so forth. So it's that level of freedom that I hope we see, and then that's where the magic kicks in, and we're like, what rabbit will we pull out of the hat by 2050?
I love it. I love it. Chris Denson, Future of Ingenuity. Thank you so much for joining us today on Future of XYZ.
Thank you.
For everyone watching, you can also listen anywhere you get your favorite podcasts and be sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify because that's how more people find us. And if you're listening, you can watch on YouTube, you can follow on Instagram, and you can find all past shows, over 170 episodes now of Future of XYZ at ifdesign.com/XYZ. Thank you again, Chris, and we will see you all in 2 weeks.
See ya.